By the end of June 25, 2009, the world would stop. News anchors would break down on live television. Fans would collapse in the streets. The name Michael Jackson would be spoken in past tense for the first time in 5 decades. But 24 hours earlier, none of this had happened yet. At that moment, Michael Jackson was still alive. Still planning. Still rehearsing. Still believing that in less than 3 weeks, he would step onto the stage at the O2 Arena in London and prove to the world that the King of Pop had never left. 50 sold-out shows. Over 1 million tickets. A comeback designed to erase years of controversy, financial trouble, and public doubt. This was supposed to be his redemption. His resurrection. His final chance to reclaim the throne he had built with his own hands. The tour was called This Is It. The name carried weight. It was both a promise and a warning. A declaration that this would be the ultimate performance, the definitive statement of a career that had redefined music, dance, and fame itself. But it was also a boundary. A line he had drawn for himself. After this, he had said, he would step back. This would be the end of Michael Jackson, the performer. What no one knew, what no one could have predicted, was that the title would prove tragically prophetic. This was it. Not in the way he had imagined. Not in the way anyone had imagined. In less than 24 hours, Michael Jackson would be gone. The comeback would never happen. The shows would never be performed. The redemption would remain forever out of reach. But on June 24, 2009, at this exact moment, the world still believed. Michael Jackson was still preparing. Still fighting. Still holding on. The clock was ticking. History was about to change. And no one saw it coming. To understand what was lost on June 25th, you first have to understand what Michael Jackson represented at that moment. He was not just a musician. He was not simply a celebrity. Michael Jackson was a cultural force that had shaped 3 generations. He had become famous as a child, iconic as a young man, and mythological as an adult. By 2009, he was 50 years old. His face had changed. His reputation had been battered by allegations, trials, and tabloid obsession. His finances were in ruins. He owed hundreds of millions of dollars. He had not toured in over a decade. He had not released a major album in 8 years. To much of the world, Michael Jackson had become a tragic figure. A cautionary tale. A man who had everything and lost it. But to his fans, to the people who had grown up with his music, he remained untouchable. Thriller was still the best-selling album of all time. His videos had revolutionized the medium. His influence could be heard in every pop song on the radio. And now, against all odds, he was coming back. The This Is It tour had been announced in March. Tickets sold out in hours. The demand was so overwhelming that the original 10 shows expanded to 50. People flew in from across the world just to secure a seat. This was not nostalgia. This was proof that Michael Jackson still mattered. That his music still moved people. That his legend was still alive. But behind the spectacle, behind the sold-out arenas and the global anticipation, Michael Jackson was struggling. Those closest to him saw it. The exhaustion. The physical decline. The pressure to deliver a performance that would justify the hype, the expense, the expectations. He had always been a perfectionist. He had always demanded more from himself than seemed humanly possible. But this time, his body was failing him. This time, the costs were becoming unbearable. On June 24, 2009, Michael Jackson was 20 days away from his first show. He was running out of time. And he knew it. June 24, 2009. The day began like most others had in recent weeks. Michael Jackson was living in a rented mansion at 100 North Carrollwood Drive in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles. The house was not his. It belonged to someone else. He was paying over $100,000 per month to stay there. It was temporary. Everything in his life at that point felt temporary. He woke late. Sleep had become increasingly difficult. For years, Michael had struggled with insomnia. The inability to rest. The inability to shut his mind off. On this day, he rose sometime after noon. His children were in the house. Prince, Paris, and Blanket. They were being cared for by nannies and security staff. Michael spent time with them when he could. But most of his focus now was on the tour. On the rehearsals. On proving that he could still do this. By early afternoon, preparations were underway. Michael had a rehearsal scheduled for later that evening at the Staples Center. It was one of the final full run-throughs before the production would move to London. The crew had been working around the clock. Dancers, musicians, lighting technicians, set designers. Everyone was pushing toward the same deadline. But Michael was the center of it all. Without him, none of it mattered. At the mansion, Dr. Conrad Murray was present. Murray had been hired as Michael's personal physician. He had been living in the house, attending to Michael's needs, monitoring his health. Murray was being paid $150,000 per month. His job was to keep Michael functional, to help him sleep, to help him wake, to manage the pain, to manage the exhaustion. On the afternoon of June 24th, there were no alarms, no crises. Michael moved slowly through the house. He ate little. He spoke quietly. Those who saw him that day would later say he seemed tired, distant. But that was not unusual. Michael had seemed that way for weeks. By early evening, Michael Jackson was preparing to leave for the Staples Center. The rehearsal was scheduled to begin around 6:30. His security team coordinated the departure. Michael emerged from the mansion wearing casual clothing. A jacket, loose pants. His movements were slow, deliberate. He walked to the waiting vehicle and climbed inside. The drive to downtown Los Angeles took roughly 30 minutes. During the ride, Michael was quiet. He did not speak much. He stared out the window, his mind elsewhere. At the Staples Center, the crew was already in position. The stage was set. The lights were programmed. The dancers were warming up. Director Kenny Ortega was overseeing every detail. Ortega had worked with Michael for years. He knew him. He trusted him. But in recent weeks, Ortega had grown concerned. Michael had missed several rehearsals. When he did attend, he seemed weak, unfocused. On June 19th, just 5 days earlier, Ortega had sent Michael home. He was shivering, disoriented, unable to perform. Ortega had called the tour producers. He expressed his concerns directly. He said Michael needed professional help. He said the situation was serious. A meeting had been held. Dr. Murray attended. He reassured everyone that Michael was fine, that he would take care of him, that the tour would go on as planned. Murray told them not to worry. On June 24th, Michael arrived at the Staples Center just after 7 in the evening. He entered the building through a private entrance. He moved through the backstage corridors toward the stage. The crew greeted him. Some smiled. Some watched him carefully. Michael walked onto the stage. The lights came up. The music started. For the next several hours, he rehearsed. He sang. He moved. He worked through the choreography for Earth Song, Billie Jean, and other numbers. Witnesses would later say he seemed engaged, more present than he had been in days. He even smiled at certain moments. At the time, this seemed like progress, like a sign that things were improving. In hindsight, it would prove to be his final performance. The rehearsal ended just after midnight. Michael Jackson left the Staples Center around 12:30 in the morning on June 25th. He climbed into the vehicle. The drive back to Holmby Hills began. He arrived at the mansion sometime after 1 o'clock. He entered through the main entrance. Security locked the doors behind him. The house was quiet. His children were asleep. The staff had retired for the night. Only Dr. Conrad Murray remained on active duty. Michael went upstairs to his bedroom. The room was large. sparsely furnished. The curtains were drawn. The lights were dim. Murray followed him. This had become the routine. Michael could not sleep without help. He had told Murray this repeatedly. The insomnia was unbearable. The pressure was crushing. He needed rest. He needed relief. Murray had been providing it. For weeks, Murray had been administering sedatives to help Michael sleep. Medications that were not typically used outside of hospital settings. Lorazepam, midazolam, propofol. Propofol was the critical one. It was a powerful anesthetic. Hospitals used it for surgeries. It induced unconsciousness within seconds. Michael called it his milk. He believed it was the only thing that worked. Murray had agreed to provide it. On the early morning of June 25th, Michael lay down in his bed. He was exhausted, physically drained. He told Murray he needed to sleep, that he had another rehearsal the next day, that he could not function without rest. Murray prepared the medications. He administered lorazepam first, then midazolam. Michael did not fall asleep. He remained awake, restless, frustrated. Time passed. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Michael was still conscious, still asking for something stronger. At approximately 10 minutes past 10 in the morning, Murray made a decision. He administered 25 milligrams of propofol through an intravenous line. Michael closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. He drifted into unconsciousness. Murray sat nearby, watching, waiting. He later claimed he left the room for only 2 minutes. When he returned, Michael Jackson was not breathing. At approximately 12 minutes past noon, Dr. Conrad Murray realized that Michael Jackson had no pulse. He shook him. No response. He checked for breathing. There was none. Michael's skin was cool. His lips were turning blue. Murray began chest compressions. He pressed down on Michael's chest with both hands. He tilted his head back. He attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But Michael was lying on a soft bed. The surface was not firm enough for effective CPR. Murray did not move him to the floor. He did not call 911 immediately. Instead, he grabbed his cell phone. He called Michael's assistant. He called the head of security. He told them to come upstairs. Minutes passed. Security arrived. They entered the bedroom. They saw Michael lying motionless. They saw Murray performing CPR. One of them asked if they should call 911. Murray said yes. At 12:21 in the afternoon, the call was made. The dispatcher answered. The security staff member spoke calmly. He said someone at the residence had stopped breathing. He said they needed an ambulance immediately. The dispatcher asked questions. What was the address? Was the person conscious? Was he breathing? The staff member responded. He gave the address. He said the person was not breathing. He said CPR was being performed. The dispatcher instructed them to continue. Help was on the way. The Los Angeles Fire Department was notified. Paramedics were dispatched. At 12:26, the first unit arrived at the mansion. They entered the property. They were directed upstairs. They reached the bedroom. They saw Michael Jackson lying on the bed. They saw Dr. Murray standing nearby. They took over. They checked for vital signs. There were none. They administered advanced cardiac life support. They inserted an airway. They attached a defibrillator. They administered medications. Nothing worked. At 1:07 in the afternoon, Michael Jackson was placed on a gurney. He was carried downstairs. He was loaded into the ambulance. The vehicle departed for UCLA Medical Center. Dr. Murray rode with him. The sirens echoed through the streets of Los Angeles. But it was already too late. The ambulance arrived at UCLA Medical Center at 1:14 in the afternoon. Michael Jackson was rushed into the emergency room. A full trauma team was waiting. They continued resuscitation efforts. They administered more medications. They shocked his heart repeatedly. They tried everything. But Michael Jackson had been without oxygen for too long. His brain had been deprived. His organs had begun to fail. At 2:26 in the afternoon on June 25, 2009, Michael Joseph Jackson was pronounced dead. He was 50 years old. Within minutes, the news began to leak. A gossip website published the report first. Other outlets followed. TMZ confirmed it. Then CNN. Then the BBC. The story spread across the world in seconds. Television programming was interrupted. Radio stations stopped their playlists. The internet slowed under the weight of millions searching for information. In Los Angeles, fans began gathering outside the hospital. Then outside the mansion in Holmby Hills. Then at the Walk of Fame. They brought flowers, candles, photographs. They cried. They sang his songs. Around the world, the reaction was the same. In London, crowds gathered in Piccadilly Circus. In Tokyo, in Paris, in Rio de Janeiro. Michael Jackson's music played in the streets. His face appeared on every screen. The shock was universal. The grief was global. The This Is It tour was cancelled. The 50 shows would never happen. The tickets were refunded. The stage was dismantled. Within days, the investigation began. Detectives searched the mansion. They interviewed Dr. Conrad Murray. They seized medical records, medications, equipment. The coroner performed an autopsy. The cause of death was determined to be acute propofol intoxication. The manner of death was ruled homicide. 2 years later, Dr. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He served 2. Michael Jackson's children were placed in the custody of his mother, Catherine. His estate, which had been drowning in debt, became one of the most profitable in entertainment history. His music sales exploded. His legacy was debated, celebrated, questioned, defended, but none of it brought him back. This was Day Falling. One day, everything changes.